Hey everybody, Objectively Dan here. And did you know that according to a recent poll by Pew Research, 4 in 10 people worldwide believe in witches? And while 40% doesn't seem that bad, when you start to look into it, it's a little bit more concerning. And just to be clear, we're not talking about your friendly neighborhood Wiccans here either. I'm talking about malevolent spellcasters that can cast things like the evil eye and can like ruin lives through, magic, right? So in some countries like Morocco, the amount of belief is as high as 9 out of 10 people, whereas countries like Sweden had only about a 10% level of belief. And of course, to many of us, a belief in people who can cast spells on others and alter reality kind of seems far-fetched in the first place. But if you do believe in these kinds of witches, please call in because the show is starting right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Truth Wanted. I am your host, Objectively Dan, and this is the call-in show that happens every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time, where we talk to people about what they believe and why. And if you'd like to call us, you can do that at 512-991-9242 or call through your computer at tiny.cc/call TW. And as always, Truth Wanted is a product of the atheist community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And every single week, I always try to have a special guest. This week is no different. It's special guest, former special guest, now host, Kelley Laughlin. Kelley is joining me this week. And what's up, Kelley?
Thanks, Dan. I didn't think I was that special, but thanks
a lot.
Special,
I appreciate Kelley. It. You are special.
I appreciate that.
Just look at that tie. That's a very special looking tie.
That's a pretty sharp tie.
I like it.
I like it too because I get a lot of dirty looks with it where I live.
I bet you do. I bet you do. And you're not even gay. Like, that's the funniest part about it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's very funny.
My son works in a retail store and he saw mine and he wanted one. So I bought him one as well. And he wears it to work all the time. And half the town now thinks he's gay because he wears that.
That is kind of sad. Like, you can't even wear okay, well, maybe I get that. Obviously, if you are gay, right, and you want to show that in some way, like, there's gotta be something to represent it, right? So I get that, but it's like, now I can't wear a rainbow out without somebody thinking that I'm gay, which I'm not. Not that it's, I guess, a big deal, but it's like,
I don't care.
I don't know. It's a cultural identifier that I can't really use in the same way anymore, but it doesn't really matter, right? Kelley, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. A little tired, a little worn out because I'm getting old, but good.
Whatever. Kelley, let me tell you guys something. Kelley hit me with you look tired before we started the show. He said it twice to me, by the way. So
I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry.
I was just making an observation, though. I didn't mean it in a bad or negative way.
There's a stereotype about dudes saying that to women, and I just thought that was really funny because the way you said it to me, it was like, oh, okay, well, I guess this is what happens now. So that's okay. I do got some energy, some G fuel with me here on deck. I'm ready to go, and I'm excited to talk about the show, the thing that we do every single week, Fridays at 7 p.m. Central, which is what, Kelley? That's right. Take calls. We have open lines right now, and we want to talk to you. So you should call the number below at 512-991-9242 or tiny.cc/call TW because we want to talk to some folks. But before we do anything, we always have to start off with the We Want the Truth segment, Kelley. Last week, we asked, what's your guilty pleasure? And so here were some of our favorite answers from that. Okay, let's go through the comments from last week with our prompt. Our prompt last week was no, I was about to read We Want the Truth. That's so funny, Kelley. Gosh, I really am so tired. I need to get my stuff together. Last week we asked you, what's your guilty pleasure? And here are our favorite answers. Number 3 comes from Ironclad Alibi, who says, what's your guilty pleasure? Doing all those biblical sins because I know I can and won't be punished for them, which is a great answer. I think about this too. 10 years ago, the stuff I do today would have drove me crazy that I do the things that I do, and not, and just like little things like cussing as much as I do, just, stuff that I don't even think about now. But yeah, used to really bother me. So good for you that you can enjoy some of that. Number 2 comes from Chuck Gatos, who says, back before cell phones, my guilty pleasure was targeting telephone solicitors with my outgoing answering machine message, such as, you have reached Chuck's answering machine. If you're selling something, I'll take 10. Please leave payment instructions at the beep, which is awesome. Shout outs to the folks like all those YouTubers and stuff that actually like prank those fake scam call centers and stuff. Like that's kind of become a thing recently. I really think that stuff's interesting and also very funny. Number 1 comes from Shay the Crocheter, who says, I don't always tell my kids when bubble wrap comes in a package. I keep it to myself to pop later, which is very, very, very funny. And I would probably do the same thing. Kelley, do you ever do something like that with your kids?
I've stolen their Halloween candy.
Yeah.
At night. Yeah, totally done that. Played with their games at night after they've gone to bed. Sure. That's one of the.
Let me ask you this, Kelley. Did you do like Tooth Fairy and stuff with your kids?
You know what? I did do that. It was against my better wishes. I had an argument with my ex about doing that, but yeah, I ended up doing it.
Did you keep the teeth?
I did not want to.
Don't tell me you kept the teeth.
I don't have any of the teeth. Interestingly enough, I found some baby teeth from my puppy, my dog, the other day when I was going through some old stuff. But I don't have any of my kids' baby teeth. And I was, when you asked me, I was wondering did my ex keep any of them? I don't know. I don't know. But I didn't keep any. It seems kind of weird to keep teeth. I remember my daughter, though, asking me why the Tooth Fairy wanted all those teeth. So parents, if you get asked this question, I told her that's what they build their houses out of. They use them like little bricks.
Yeah.
And there's
so many other better building materials.
Yeah. Well, she didn't know. She's only about 7.
It's true. It's true. But it is kind of weird when you think about it. What is the Tooth Fairy doing with all those teeth? Hey, that's a prompt. We should do that as a prompt.
Oh, yeah.
That's a really good one. Maybe we save that for later. You have the absolute most insane prompt. You submitted the prompt this week. And I can't believe I should have been more. I don't know. This is a crazy one. We're going with it though, Kelley. It's oh my gosh. What's the difference between Jesus and pizza? Like, I don't know. I feel like this is a C.S. Lewis situation with a raven and a writing desk. Where, like, you know what I'm talking about? Where people were like, "Oh, what's the answer to this thing?" And it's just nothing. Like, is this what you're going for here, Kelley? What is your thought process with
No,
this?
I was looking for some creative answers, and I had one off the top of my head. I had another one too, and I honestly can't remember what it was right now. But the one I got right off the top of my head was that if you nail pizza up, it'll just slide off.
Oh my God. Oh my God, Kelley. Oh my God. That's jeez. Okay. All right. Well, with that in mind, we're asking you today, commenters, tell us what's the difference between Jesus and pizza. And we'll read the top 3. I hope we get at least 3. If I watched this show, I would not comment on this week. That's crazy. I wouldn't know what to do. But some of you folks are probably more creative than me. So
I think that's open for a lot of funny answers myself, but we'll see. We'll see how creative.
It's open for some answers, Kelley. It's open for something. We'll figure it out. But yeah, that's our prompt for this week. So leave a comment below and we'll pick the top 3 answers for next week. So for now, Kelley, I want to talk to you about how are you doing? We kind of talked a little bit before, but it's been a minute since you and I have been on the same show together. It's kind of a Memorial Day weekend. It's kind of an awkward spot to get guests. Spoiler alert. I mean, not spoiler alert. Just behind the scenes thing. It's hard to get guests and book a show every week with different folks. And like, if in US here, it's Memorial Day weekend stuff. It's actually honestly incredible how many people we get on this show, which I'm very, very happy about. But I like shows like this too. We kind of had one recently as well with MD Aware, where it's just like Truth Wanted hosts. We kind because we already kind of got our own dynamic and stuff. And I don't know, I think those are fun too.
Yeah, I was actually looking forward to doing this. And fortunately for you, I live in a place where everybody goes for Memorial Day weekend. So I was already in there. I was already there and didn't have to go anywhere. So
yeah, that's cool. Shout out to the folks who are watching the show live tonight and are hanging out with us, because you guys are awesome. And we'll get to some callers in just a bit as well and talk to you guys. But we do have a super chat I want to read already from Lenwee Silverweb, who gave $5 and said, "I've been saving this for Kelley. You read this then.
I think he wants me to read it.
Yeah.
6 slippery snails silently slid southward, swiftly escaping the six sheep's sneezes."
That's pretty good. That was really good. I'm okay with tongue twisters. The S ones always mess me up though. She sells seashells by the seashore. That's as fast as I can say that. I can't do that any faster.
The six sheep's sick is supposedly one of the hardest tongue twisters to do. So
I don't know what that one is.
And it's in that one sort of near the end of it, So I had always practice saying that one when I was younger, so I could say it. So sorry, Lenwee. I had practiced that part of that one.
Okay, all right. I want to try this one now. 6 slippery snails silently slid southward, swiftly escaping the six sheep's sneezes.
Awesome.
I think it did okay.
Awesome.
You know what it is, Kelley? I have a lot of practice reading from things out loud in a live context because of this show, and also just like streaming in general, which is just very funny. I felt like I had like a thing we have like stand-ups at our work, and I had to like do one like every week. There's like a game that we do with our team, and I like led the game this week, and I realized, God, I'm acting like a fucking show host right now. I'm being very self-conscious about it, but it's all I know. So anyway, so that's how I've been recently. But yeah, Kelley, this is a good call-in show, and a good call-in show means that we talk to people on the phone. We have a couple people in the queue. You want to talk to some folks?
I would love to talk to some, Penny. Let's bring them on up.
Okay, let's do it. But before we do, Kelley, we got to thank the patron of the week, because every single week we're always giving a shout out to at least one person on that Patreon. It's tiny.cc/PatreonTW. Just a reminder, Kelley doesn't get that money. I don't get that money. That's for Truth Wanted. That's for the show and also the atheist community of Austin. And it lets the atheist community of Austin know, hey, Truth Wanted is still a cool show and should get as much support as humanly possible. So thank you to everybody that donates. But this week's patron of the week is getting that special shout out. It's Victoria Vanderveer. Thank you so much, Victoria. And thank you to everybody that donates. You guys rock. Okay. We got that out of the way, and we're going to some calls. You ready, Kelley?
Sure, I'm totally ready.
Okay, this is, I think, an interesting one that we got coming up at the top here. It is Erasmus calling in from Los Angeles, California. Erasmus, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
We were just talking, I think, this morning, were we not?
I'm not sure if we were, but we did speak in VC and the ACD. So I wanted, you did mention you wanted to speak on the Truth Wanted, so I decided to call in.
Yeah, well, thanks for calling. Thanks for, accepting my invite. I appreciate that.
Shout outs to the Atheist Community of Austin Discord. And shout outs to you for calling in. Erasmus, what do you want to talk to us about?
Well, I kind of wanted to continue the discussion with Kelley, because I didn't really get to, talk about it in full. It was about the evil that Satan does, or the killing that Satan does, sort of through temptation.
Okay.
As I recall, wasn't I claiming that there was nothing that Satan did in the Bible that was actually evil? Is that the same conversation?
Yeah, that was the same conversation. Yeah, That was more so it.
Okay. So Kelley's saying that Satan has never actually done anything evil, at least what's recorded in the Bible. And your position, Erasmus, is that Satan is a real thing and does do evil things. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I'll give my take real quick. It's kind of a complicated question because I think Christians have kind of developed the figure of Satan where Judaism doesn't have the same kind of idea about Satan. So they talk about the serpent in the Garden of Eden, and that's literally just the serpent. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the devil. That's a later interpretation, I believe, that's talked about in Revelation, if not one of the other New Testament Gospels. Not Gospels, sorry, one of the New Testament books that gives that interpretation. I think Paul talks about that actually, maybe. But also, as the Satan is a Jewish idea, a Jewish word that comes means like the accuser, right? And so this is most demonstrated the best in the book of Job. At the beginning of the book of Job, there's God literally have a conversation with the Satan, the accuser, and that's where kind of that comes from. And then later in the Gospels, you do see Jesus supposedly talking to the devil, and there's kind of this weird continuity in all this that again, different interpretations from different authors are going to give different ideas about what Satan is. So I don't even know, in short, if Satan is a coherent enough idea to be able to say, oh yeah, these are all necessarily talking about the same things. They're definitely talking about similar things. But in most instances, or at least a lot of instances, I don't think Satan is actively doing as much wrong as Christians claim. I don't know if he never does anything wrong. I think he's definitely killed people a few times, but definitely not as many times as God. I know that for a fact. So anyway, that's my take on the situation. Erasmus, I'll let you get your thoughts out there.
So in the case of Bible, it does speak about Satan, for instance, in I believe Ezekiel 28 as being in Eden, in the Garden of Eden, in Ezekiel 28. But one thing that Satan...
Okay, there you go. So I was wrong about that. So there is some Old Testament interpretations of that, if that's correct. But I can't verify like live on the air. Maybe I should, but there you go. I know at some point in the Bible, there is a later interpretation about the Garden of Eden, but I'd have to look into that. So anyway, thank you, Erasmus.
Go ahead. You go ahead and read it, Erasmus. Yeah, I'm reading it myself right now, and I don't even see that this is about Satan. But go ahead.
So it states in Ezekiel. Oh no, I had it just now. Ezekiel, Jeremiah.
Well, okay. Is this 20... super important to the overall point that you wanted to make? Yeah. Like, is your overall point that Satan is a real thing and harms people? Like, is that...
I don't see that here, but and actually when God is making the word of the Lord comes down to me, and he's speaking to the Son of Man, and this is what the sovereign Lord says: you are the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect beauty. You are in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorns you: carnelian, chrysolite, emerald, blah blah blah. Your settings and mountings were made of gold, and it keeps going through all this. But he's talking about the Son of Man, not Satan. I don't understand how this is relevant to the point.
When it states Son of Man, it's speaking to the Son of Man is speaking about Ezekiel. He's the Son of Man that's being spoken to, and he's being told to give a lament to the king of Tyre. And
yeah.
However, what he's being told to speak about is Satan, because it states that they were in the lament being given is given to a person who is in Eden, in the Garden of God, but also that they were an anointed cherub in the Garden of Eden, which would not make sense for an actual person, because no person is a cherub and no person is...
Okay, I'll give you that. But where in this passage does it say that Satan actually did evil? Because I'm not seeing that. I see that his heart became proud. He corrupted wisdom. But I don't see anything where he actually went and did anything actually evil. So
it looks like, and for context for everybody else, we're looking at Ezekiel chapter 28, verses, I think, 12 through 19. Gosh, I can't believe we're doing some Bible reading right now. But I mean, maybe we can get to the
it says
bottom of
it
this.
said he was filled with violence and he sinned, but sin isn't necessarily evil. It's just against the religion, right?
It says,
if you go against the second commandment, say, that's not really evil in the eyes of everybody else in the world except for Christians. So I wouldn't call that evil.
This translation, Kelley, says, "You are blameless in your ways from the day that you were created until iniquity was found in you. In the abundance of your trade, you were filled with violence and you sinned. So I cast you as a profane thing from the mountain of God. And the guardian cherub drove you out from among the stones of fire. Your heart was proud because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of your splendor." It's just accusing him of being having a heart full of violence, I guess. But accusations of a heart full of violence, as Kelley pointed out, is not the same thing as
the United States, as an example, the USA did a lot of violent things to end World War II, right? But that wasn't evil. That was like getting rid of an evil, right? But it was still violent actions on our part. So violence isn't necessarily evil.
Necessarily, yeah.
It does connect to. I would say it connects to the event in the Garden of Eden because Satan
didn't do anything evil in the Garden of Eden, though, did he?
Yeah. What did Satan do that was evil?
He tempted man to sin, thus bringing death to humanity.
That's not evil. That to say that here, if you eat this fruit, you will gain knowledge that God doesn't want you to have, that's not evil. I would say that the act of keeping knowledge from people would be more evil myself, but that's my opinion. That's censoring what people can and can't know is way more evil than having somebody say, hey, you shouldn't listen to that person who wants to censor you. You should go ahead and learn everything you want.
Well, part of the reason that, for instance, this is a worldly example, but part of the reason why sometimes some knowledge is hidden is so that it does not bring danger. For instance, we don't give out we give out library cards so that people can learn about astrology, science.
Yes, but things. However, but this isn't. We're not talking about doing the knowledge to do bad things. It was the knowledge of good and evil. That was what was given. I'll even give you the exact verses here.
I can go to Genesis. I'm aware of Genesis. I'm simply saying that in the case of some knowledge is hidden because we do not want it to be used for evil, such as making a nuclear bomb. We don't want people to know that.
Yeah, but how can we know what we're doing is evil if we don't even have knowledge of good and evil?
Well, we have a statement which is don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah, how do I know that's bad? How do I know that's bad? If I'm Adam and I'm in the garden and you're telling me don't eat from the tree, okay, I don't know good from evil. How do I know that's good or bad?
Because you're told that you will die when you...
No, I don't know what good and evil is. I literally don't know. Literally the fruit gave them the knowledge of good. It's like talking to your cat. It's like telling your cat, don't do this thing. Why does the cat care? Cat doesn't know good and evil. That's a human concept, right? That's an understanding that a cat just doesn't have. So why would I know that I should listen to God? Or why would I even know that not listening to God is a bad thing? How?
Well, because in the case of God, he put Adam and Eve in a place of pure perfection where there was no sickness, death, etc.
Okay, so
how do you know what perfection is without that knowledge?
Yeah, how do they know that it's good? They don't know what good things are either, right?
Yeah, they don't know they don't know that perfection is a good thing.
They would be experiencing good because they would be experiencing good. They would have
they would be experiencing. They wouldn't know that it was good.
The story is they don't have knowledge of good and evil.
Yeah, they would just be experiencing, period.
Yeah.
Does someone have to do something evil to know what evil is?
But you still can know what good and evil is, even if it's not demonstrated. You can be taught to you without being demonstrated. So, and they weren't taught that. So they didn't know that they were living in a good environment. They didn't know that eating of the apple was evil, which I would argue wasn't evil. So you're saying that they already experienced these things and knew what they were before they were able to experience and know what they were.
Yeah.
Kelley, do you think that you say that Adam and Eve didn't do anything bad by eating the apple. Do you think there was rape in the Garden of Eden?
What does that have anything to do with anything?
First off, there were no other people in the Garden of Eden, right?
Allegedly.
So allegedly, yes.
But
allegedly.
To be clear, too, Erasmus, neither Kelley or I actually believe any of these events actually happened in reality. So we're just talking about a fictional story.
So
anyway, I'm interrupting. Go ahead, Kelley.
I don't believe the Garden of Eden actually existed, right? But if it did, I don't believe, if the whole story is true, then no, I don't believe rape existed before the apple was eaten. Or if it did exist in the Garden of Eden, then nobody would understand that act was an evil act because they didn't have the knowledge of good and evil. So even if it did occur, it could not be considered an evil act because people didn't know what evil was.
Yeah.
If I might ask, Kelley, if I commit a crime without knowing the law, does that mean I haven't broken the law?
Law is different from what's good and evil, according to God. Doesn't matter. There's all kinds of shitty laws out there. And there's been shitty laws all over the place. The law does not equal morality.
The Garden of Eden isn't a courtroom.
Yeah, and sorry, Kelley, I'm interrupting you because
no, please, Dan, you're fine.
Erasmus, let me ask you this, okay? Do you have any kids? Do you mind me asking that? Do you have any kids?
I don't have any kids, but let's say for the sake of argument, I have a kid.
Okay, let's say you have a kid. Let's say you don't teach them good and evil. Let's say you don't teach them right and wrong. Like you don't introduce that concept to them. Would you say that's a good thing or a bad thing if you withheld, telling them what's right and what's wrong?
If I tell them what's right and what's wrong, depends on what age they are. I mean, if they're babies.
No, never. You never tell them your entire life. You never plan on telling them. You don't raise them with any sense of good or bad, right?
Okay. All right. I'd say that would be bad.
Yes, and that's why we think that this is bad, because God doesn't do that. God has no intention in the book, at least he doesn't explain it, that he's going to teach his creation right and wrong, and that's why we think that this is bad, right?
Why do you think that God created the tree in the first place? It is possible.
I have no idea.
You know what? Actually, now that you brought that up, that's an interesting thought. God, who supposedly knows past, present, and future, put the tree there knowing that if he put it there, Adam and Eve would eat off of it, and therefore he would punish them. So that kind of tells me that God might be a little bit of a sadist.
Yeah, it's true.
God, it is possible that he desired that they not eat of the tree until they would be ready for such a thing.
Well, how do we know that the serpent wasn't the bearer of God's message to go ahead and eat that tree? Eat off of that tree.
Much like Satan was in the garden as I put.
No, the serpent was in the garden, not Satan. Yeah. Let's get that straight. The serpent was. Never once does the Bible equate the serpent with Satan. Never once.
It does. The Book of Revelations.
Yeah, Revelation. I was right.
Revelations is conjecture about the future. The Book of Revelations doesn't count.
Well, Revelation is one Christian text retroactively interpreting Jewish, stories, Judaism, tales about Judaism into a Christian narrative, much as like the Book of Mormon does with the books of Christianity and Judaism and, Islam does, etc. But we're getting off track here, Erasmus. Here's the point, right? You have said in your own words, and I think, and I feel the exact same way, by the way, which is that if you don't teach your children right from wrong, that's a bad thing. That I don't think that's a good thing. I think you should teach people right from wrong, or at least give your understanding of right and wrong, because right, we may not always be right about everything. But the point is, withholding that is wrong. And Satan is giving people that knowledge. His goal is to say, look, you can have good and evil, or have an understanding of good and evil. And that's why I don't think that's a bad thing. There's nothing in there that screams to me this is an evil act, other than it's not what God wants. That's it.
I'd like to make an example out of this. Going back to your example about what that act that would be evil in the Garden of Eden. Let's say Adam didn't know the difference between good and evil, and he left the Garden of Eden, and he came upon a woman and forced himself upon that woman. He wouldn't know that what he was doing was an evil act. He wouldn't even know that thing was an evil act.
Why would he do that
because he didn't know it was evil, because he just wanted to do it and he didn't know it was evil. He sees the animals do it. Why can't he do it?
No. Why would he do something evil if his environment?
He doesn't know that it's evil, Erasmus.
Why did Adam eat the fruit? Evil. If he lived in a perfect environment, why did Adam eat the fruit in the first place then? Right? Like people just do things. I don't know.
Because in the Bible it states that Adam and Eve were beguiled by the serpent, that is Satan.
Yeah, did what I just say just go right over your head, Erasmus? Because it seems like it did. It seems like without the knowledge of good and evil, Adam could have gone around forcing himself on women, killing men, robbing people, and he never would have known that that was evil, because he never learned what evil was. To him, that would just be a thing.
Yeah.
Kelley, the problem with that is that death entered through Adam, so there wouldn't be.
Death has nothing to do with your actions while you're alive, Erasmus. It has nothing to do with it. It has nothing to do with the idea of what is good and what is evil. Death is something that comes at the end of life when you don't care about good and evil anymore because you're dead.
Yeah.
Kelley, Adam was also in an environment in which he wasn't doing any evil acts, but actually was doing acts.
I didn't say that he was, Erasmus. You're not. Like I said, this seems to be going right over your head. When the point I'm trying to make.
Clearly, Adam, if eating the fruit was an evil act, Erasmus, then clearly Adam is capable of doing evil in a perfect environment. So it's a moot point.
Only because he was beguiled to do evil by the serpent, by Satan.
Okay.
So then it wasn't perfect because beguiling could be done there, right?
Yeah, exactly. Then it's not a perfect environment anyway. If you can be...
It was a perfect environment in the sense that there was...
It clearly wasn't, because they got kicked out, okay?
because they were able to do something that they weren't supposed to do.
They kind of messed it up, so I don't know if it was that perfect.
If it was perfect, they wouldn't have ever been able to eat off the tree. The tree wouldn't have been there. The tree wouldn't have been there until God was ready for them to eat off of it. And then he could have put the tree there. He didn't have to have the temptation of the tree there at all.
Yeah,
which goes back to my original point.
Imagine this. What if we put, Erasmus, a flamethrower in the Garden of Eden? God just put that there. And then the serpent tempts Adam to use that flamethrower to kill somebody, right? You got to wonder, why was the flamethrower there in the first place, right? Like, if that was going to be an option, it's ridiculous. It shouldn't have happened, but it could have been prevented if there were no flamethrowers. So why the hell was there a tree there that could have had the rules broken in that way? It just doesn't make any sense. Here's why I think this. Why, Erasmus? Why? Tell me.
Part of the reason is because it was for Adam and Eve at a later time.
You don't know that.
Very much.
You're literally making that up.
Yeah, even
You
if
are
it was for a
absolutely just
later,
inventing things.
even if it was for a later time, he could have created the tree at that later time and not had the temptation there. You're not listening to me. I just told you that, Erasmus.
Yeah.
He didn't have to put the tree there before he needed it. He could have just kept it in the closet until he needed it.
Yep.
Part of the problem with that is that when he, yeah, I'm here. Part of the problem with that is that when he created all the trees and vegetation, he kind of put that in the whole Garden of Eden.
Yeah, he did, and he didn't have to. That's our point.
Yeah.
He didn't have to put it there, Erasmus. He did, but he didn't have to. He could have waited. He could have waited until Adam and Eve were ready for that knowledge and then put it there. Or else he could have even just came down and touched each one of them on the forehead and give them that knowledge at that point.
Yeah.
He didn't have to have a tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden.
Yeah,
it didn't need to be there.
This is just ad hoc because it's like we're already creating full-fledged people out of the ground. What are we waiting on? What do you mean we have to wait? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Because while physically they were, adults, spiritually they were very much babies.
Okay, you are Erasmus. You're making this up. Do you know this? Do you know that you're just making things up?
I would say no. In many
let me tell you, you're making things up. You are telling a story about a story. None of what you're saying is in the text. This is a fan fiction that you're writing to me right now.
No. In the New Testament, it speaks about how...
Yeah, the New Testament, guess what, man? They were making up shit too. You think they had better access to the Garden of Eden than we do today? No, they just heard other stories. It's just stories, man. None of this is real. There is no reason to make sense of any of this. We don't have to go on back and forth about why God did this or why Adam did that, because none of it actually happened, right? There's no reason for us to believe that any of this is real.
I suppose that's what you believe. But because I am a theist, I do believe that ultimately those who wrote the New Testament were inspired by the Holy Spirit, and God revealed to them what He revealed to Moses, who wrote Genesis.
You know what? Last night I got revealed that all of it was bullshit.
Yeah, Erasmus, why if?
It was just a voice. It was just a voice in my head told me that. Sorry,
I'm assuming, Erasmus, you don't believe Joseph Smith has been revealed to, right? I'm assuming you don't think the Holy Spirit has revealed anything, or to the Prophet Muhammad, right?
Or the Sun Myung Moon.
No,
I
don't think you have.
Ask Kelly. You said
no. I'm asking you this, Erasmus. You don't believe Joseph Smith has anything of value to add to your life. You don't think the Prophet Muhammad is something you should be taking seriously. Why should I take Paul seriously? Why does the Apostle Paul matter at all?
The Apostle Paul was inspired by the Holy Spirit of God. But
why? Why do you think that's true?
So was Muhammad, and so was Joseph Smith.
Yeah. Why is the Apostle Paul special?
In the case of Joseph Smith and Muhammad, and to an extension yourself, Kelly, because you did say you heard a voice. Those individuals were hearing a voice, but it wasn't coming from God, because God...
How do you know? How do you know? Were you there when I heard my voice last night? How do you know I did not hear the voice of God last night? Can you tell me exactly how you knew that I wasn't listening to God last night?
Because the Holy Spirit of God testifies about Jesus Christ. And
well, yeah, that's what he was telling me. He was telling me that, Jesus came down, I sent him down there, but all that stuff that's in the Old Testament, that's all bullshit. None of that stuff ever happened. That's exactly what he told me.
And Kelly,
he told me Jesus was his son.
Kelly's being obviously sarcastic, but to counter this, Erasmus, Joseph Smith talked a lot about Jesus as well. Like, he definitely attested to Jesus. So I don't know why Paul attesting to Jesus makes his claims any more valid than anybody else in history?
Well, part of the reason Paul is accepted is not only is he making a testimony of himself, but Peter, one of the apostles that actually met Jesus, writes in his epistles to the churches that Paul is reliable. Paul was a part of the early church. Muhammad never met Jesus and contradicts Jesus's divinity. Joseph Smith also does as well. There are countless points that the old.
I just want you to be clear. I'm going to make an analogy here. David Koresh claimed he was the Son of God. He did. He claimed he was the Messiah. And we have a direct follower of David Koresh saying, hey, I like this other guy who never met David Koresh, but I think his conversion is legit, and I think we should listen to him. Does that make any of this more valid or something worth considering?
In the case of Koresh, no, because Jesus Christ has stated he's going to return in the clouds with great power and great glory. And
David Koresh said he was going to come back too. And I haven't seen Jesus come back yet. I certainly haven't seen David Koresh come back yet. Why does Jesus get a pass here?
Because unlike David Koresh, there's attestations of visions of Jesus Christ from the time of the apostles, even to now.
I think you maybe need to be more familiar with David Koresh, because there's a lot of people who attest to him being the Son of God.
Yeah, and there was a lot of people that saw Elvis after he died too. So,
but they don't have visions of David Koresh, nor has David Koresh resurrected.
That's why I brought up the Elvis sightings.
You're wrong. There are followers to this day of David Koresh that live at the compound and still talk about being in communion with him. That is absolutely still the case. But again, we don't take that seriously because we don't think David Koresh was the real deal. I don't think Jesus was the real deal either. I don't think that there's any reason why we should believe that we should be taking any of these people seriously just because some people say that they have visions sometimes, right? Like, we have to figure this out, Erasmus, because there's a million people in history that have said they know the Son of God or have been around somebody that said they're the Son of God, whatever, right? Jesus is one of those people. Why are we taking this into account or more seriously more than anybody else in history?
There's also the fact that many other different religions do state that Jesus was a God or was a way, but Jesus Christ himself states that he is. I'm not speaking about the Abrahamic religions.
Does that inform your belief, Erasmus? Do you think that Jesus is a God because other religions say that he is?
Stating that they have a part of the.
That's fine. That's other people. I'm talking about you, Erasmus. Why do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God?
Jesus is the Son of God because he died, was buried, and resurrected on the third day.
How does that make him the Son of God, though?
Or really, like, why should you believe anything about Jesus being divine in any way, or that any of these stories have anything to do with reality?
Because of personal experience. That's one reason.
Okay.
The scriptures are another reason.
Okay. I think we've been going through this conversation for a while, so maybe we can try to put a tail end to this. But I think I appreciate you calling in and talking to us about this. But when it comes to personal experience, there's a lot of people that have personal experiences with stuff, man, that it just doesn't tell anything to the truth. What I want to import to you is we are talking about other claims from other people because we truly think that Jesus is just like all these other guys. If you really want to convince us or, about debates about theology, about Satan's doing whatever, like all that stuff is ancillary, right? We need to figure out the baseline stuff, whether Jesus is the real deal or not, and then we can talk about whatever his followers have to say about this and that in the Old Testament and other stuff, right? If you want to have a dialogue with atheists, you really have to come to terms with this idea. Why should I care about what Jesus has to say, or what other people have said about Jesus more accurately, right? But anyway, I got to cut you off there, Erasmus, because we've been on this for for too long, and we got to get to some other callers. But I do appreciate you talking to us on this subject. But yeah, sorry, it's just I don't know what to do when we're going in these big circles like this, Kelley.
I don't even, that's kind of how our conversation went this morning too. So I was kind of hoping we were going to get beyond that point, but it just didn't. It seems that he's just convinced that that's the way it is. And it seems like he's not even open to thinking about things that aren't lining up in his rudder or in his whole belief system, because there are a lot of things that just aren't lining up, like, like having the tree there.
Well, again, all that stuff is just, I don't know. That's just the story part of it, right? Like, I'm interested in getting to the baseline of the belief here. I wasn't doing a very good job doing street epistemology in that conversation.
No,
that was a
neither
bad
was I.
example, and I'm very tired this week. I'm blaming it on that. I think it's just. I'm not saying a good example. I'm not saying a good example with what I think a good conversation should go, because I think we got too lost in the weeds. So I'm calling myself out on that. I think if in the future, if I'm going to have a conversation with Erasmus, I would really want to focus again on why come to the kind of what we were doing at the end there. Why even start with any of this, right? Like, why should we care about what the Gospels say about Jesus, for example? Why does that matter? Why does that give me any credence? Or why should I have any credence towards that? I don't know. Anyway, Kelley, do you have any thoughts on that conversation?
Yeah, I just felt like we didn't get anywhere. I don't feel like we beat through the shroud of belief that was keeping us from having a real conversation there, I guess, is to use some flowery language. But yeah, I just don't think we were making it through there.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But let's keep the show moving. We got a couple super chats that I want to read out. One is from Prophet Azad, my buddy, who gave $4.99. Who said, "Book Brad Stein," which is hilarious. They donated this like way long time ago, and I don't know if they're still watching. But you know what's odd? I don't know if Brad Stein would be interested. For those of you who don't know, I co-host with Zod on another show called Zidanza, and I don't know if I've just been in a mood lately or what, but we roasted the heck out of Brad Stein, and it was amazing. It was great. Brad Stein is a terrible Christian comedian, so that's a whole thing. You guys should all watch that stream because I really like it. But thank you for the donation, Zod, and for watching me on not my best today. I'm off my game today, so very unfortunate that you see me at that. But anyway, number 2 has come from Marsha Everett, who gave $10 and said, I flock with PLAGNIBTX, pronounced planet, easier to say than LGBT, polyamory, lesbian, asexual, gay, non-binary, intersex, bisexual, transgender, atheist. That is a long acronym. I've never seen that before. Have you seen that before?
No, I haven't.
If this is an original creation, Marsha, that's awesome. I don't know if it'll get as much traction. I think LGBT is a little easier to say.
She's trying to. She's just saying you can send it down to Planet X.
Planet, yeah, and she's including other stuff like atheists in there. So I mean, shout outs to you for coming up with that. That's pretty. It's pretty great. I do like it. Next one's from Gray Haired Gamer, who gave $10 and said, "Dan, do your coworkers know that you do the show?" I keep things on the DL for the most part. I do. My employer does know, because I figure at some point they're going to Google me or something or whatever. So, it's kind of out there, but I kind of have to keep things low key when it comes to work conversations. Cause it's like, this shit I say on here, it's kind of, it's not always, it's not the best water cooler talk. So sometimes, especially when you work with, groups of people with different ideas than you do. So, I don't know. Kelley, you don't have to have this problem because you've been self-employed for a long time. So
I do talk to customers in my store about it though. And I have one of our flyers hanging up and I give out the little pull-offs to people all the time. So, and have them watch the show or even call in if they want. I talk to a lot of crystal people, so I try to talk them into calling in, but nobody ever does.
Yeah. It's kind of one of those things where it's just like, I do this thing on Fridays and I kind of try to leave it at that. But it's kind of awkward sometimes. I'm not going to lie. It's been really weird. Dating for a long time was really weird. Really, really weird. I'm so glad I'm engaged now, Kelley, because, this is kind of a lot to bring into somebody else's life, which is, by the way, I've been doing things on YouTube for like over half a decade. And like, I don't know, that's a burden. It's a burden on another person. Honestly.
I can see that because you're kind of bringing this whole public life into your relationship. I can see that.
I really hope I don't have to date anymore. Because it just makes things more difficult, if anything. But I'm happy where I'm at in my relationship now. So anyway, let's talk to some more folks who want to talk to us. My goodness. We got a couple of interesting ones. I think I want to talk to Dan, who's calling in from Canada. We've got Dan on the line. You're on Truth Wanted. What's going on?
Hello, Dan. Hello, Kelley. Thanks for taking my call.
Hey, Dan, what's up?
How's it going, Canada, Dan?
It's going. Having a good day watching the show. Been hanging out in the chat. So, all good.
Awesome.
But reading some legitimate news articles, CBC stuff, and they're talking about an increase in UFO reports from airline pilots across Canada. And I'm just wondering, with everything going on and a reliable-ish source of information, is it time we start considering non-terrestrial sources for these aircraft?
So my answer to that is no. And of course, Dan, that out of all the hosts that host this show or other shows, I try to stay on the beat with anything alien news related. And so obviously I've seen stuff related to this too, right? More side support, not just in Canada, but in the US and other places as well. But as long as we've had commercial air travel, we have had, UFOs, be reported in some form or another. This has pretty much always been the thing as long as we've been flying in the air. The fact that we may have an uptick right now may just point to a trend of, hey, we're kind of talking about UFOs in like mainstream news and stuff right now. And I'm not saying that's exactly what it is, but there's easily identifiable correlations that could be made that don't have to necessarily be, oh, the aliens are real and are just showing up now. Right. So it doesn't really concern me at all, to be honest with you. I don't think it makes me think that we have to change our minds about anything. But Kelley, what do you think?
Yeah, I was just wondering if maybe, because we do have these UFO flaps, right, where there's all of a sudden there a big uptick in sightings. Yeah. And I always wonder, is that a result of actually more people having sightings, or the media actually paying more attention to the people who are having sightings? And I tend to think it's more of the second. I think there's probably just as many, and there have been sightings going all the way back, as far as I know, into the 1890s that have been documented when all of the airships or the UFOs look like big dirigibles, basically. So, with ropes hanging down from them and everything. So I don't know that there's such a big uptake in sightings so much as there is just the media being interested in them. And I'll tell you what, Dan, I got $100 Canadian, and I'll bet you that in the next 20 years we don't find out that they're not extraterrestrial. And we will not find out in the next 20 years that they are extraterrestrial.
Dang. Well, I would make the same bet, so I can't bet against you. But maybe you can bet against Dan from Canada. I don't know.
I
Dan
got
from Canada.
$100 bill I can't spend in my country anyway.
But Dan from Canada can though.
Yes, that's why
That's what I'm
said
saying.
I bet $100 Canadian.
I don't know. Dan from Canada, what do you think?
Oh. I think this is online gambling across state lines.
Yeah. We may be threatening the nonprofit status of the atheist community of Austin. Maybe we should stop.
I didn't think anybody would really take me seriously, honestly.
Well, I mean, I hate that you guys are so pragmatically reliable. I don't know. I mean, yeah, there might be other more plausible explanations, but just I don't know. I mean, as you say, we've been seeing this since the 1890s. Like, I do remember a story about a prospector talking about seeing a cigar-shaped thing in the sky. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, if we've just been seeing them all along and they keep appearing to be more and more advanced, the more advanced our technology is, the more we still don't see them. I don't know, long-term observation project by a group of highly advanced people. Just, I don't know.
Here's the thing. If it's, our meter should not change. Listen, the public opinion, right, is not the most reliable thing on what they think. I mean, we just reported that 9 out of 10 people in Morocco believe that witches are real, right? And obviously, a lot of that's cultural, right? But like, you know, I guarantee you, if you ask the average person or ask if you got like 100 people in Morocco, one of them will probably tell us stories about them encountering a witch, right? Because it's such a highly cultural thing there. Like they seriously do believe witches not only just exist, which I mean, like technically, I guess they do, but like are malevolent and do things, and it causes people to believe things in ways that they wouldn't normally believe. I think we're seeing an uptick in alien stuff right now, and I think that's causing people to, you know, get nervous about UFOs and stuff and think that they're seeing something that they're really not, right? I just think that there's a very good cultural explanation for what we're seeing. If aliens are actually observing us, we have to submit better evidence than just we're seeing an uptick in UFO reports, right? That's just not going to cut it for me, at least.
No, I mean, like, I wouldn't say that I've found evidence or something that I would rely on to go, for sure, this is what's happening. Because, yeah, fuzzy photos and lights moving across grainy cameras don't mean too much.
Yeah. If you're interested in some more history about this, there's one story you can point to is Betty and Barney Hill, right? Betty and Barney Hill was one of the first recorded American folks. Right? Yeah. They were allegedly abducted by aliens, right? And before this, alien encounter stories were actually a little bit different. There's another one from the early 50s from a different guy who basically said that he talked to aliens, and it was more philosophical in nature. Like they kind of wanted to share some wisdom with him. And so there's a lot of stories that came out from that time of aliens being, you know, of a different kind of people group, but not people group, you know what I mean? A different kind of species, right? But not necessarily hostile. Right. But after Betty and Barney Hill's incident came out, you start to see a shift in alien stories in popular culture. You start to see what we're more familiar with today, which is aliens coming over to take over and do stuff. Right. You see that more in the media, the more people are reporting, hey, I was abducted by aliens. It's not just, hey, I talked to an alien or I saw an alien. There's a real big difference in that narrative, and it's fascinating to see that develop in time. We're definitely seeing some stuff like David Grush and stuff, for example, in the news, who are like, you know, talking about aliens in the mainstream. So it's absolutely no surprise to me that, yeah, we're seeing an uptick in UFOs. In fact, it would be kind of weird if we didn't see more people talking about it. I mean, it's all over TikTok every day. People are constantly talking about UFO stuff on there. Maybe that's just my feed, but, you know, regardless, I don't think it's anything to worry about, Dan. but I don't know. You tell me.
I just saw somebody in the chat mention Travis Walton, and I was just about to bring Travis Walton up because that was right around the time the narrative about aliens started to change and they started abducting people and using anal probes and stuff was the whole Travis Walton story, and it kind of blossomed out into that whole paradigm of aliens doing that kind of thing to us.
Yeah. Anyway, go ahead, Dan.
So, well, that just, I have a friend who knew him. And, long story short, not exactly the most reliable storyteller.
You don't say.
Really?
Who would have thought?
I was shocked.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I did want to give you guys a quick update, though, on my ghost hunting efforts.
Oh, yes.
Because I spent an entire month at that family member's house where ghostly encounters supposedly happen. And I guess I was too busy to be bothered by ghosts. But since returning home, I've had another experience with which I've been further assured that it is the other side trying to communicate with me. And there's just spectacular lack of evidence. And it's disappointing.
It is disappointing. It is.
I've been there. I've been there through that disappointment because it was something I really wanted to believe in. It was something I really wanted to prove. I have a scientific mind. I'm going to get into it. I'm going to prove this thing. I'm still trying to prove that there was a ghost in the building across the street from me because they keep having weird experiences there. But I don't know what kind of evidence you can actually gather for that proof. That's the problem. That's the real block to doing that.
Yeah, I mean, if they would just be a reliable ghost and keep opening the doors, say, every Tuesday at 4 p.m. or something.
Yeah, that's the thing, too. It's like it's one of those things where, just like with the whole Jesus thing, all you need is just a press release. We just need a ghost to come out and be like, yeah, ghosts are real and I'm here. Have them post an AMA on Reddit, have a little sign and say, hey, I'm Jeffrey Whitmore, the haunted ghost of this Victorian castle. Ask me anything, and then all right, the ghost question is settled. We got some testimony from a ghost or whatever, and we'd be good, right? But it's never that simple. I wish. Same thing with Jesus. I wish Jesus would come down or beam, give us a White House press conference style thing, and we could just ask questions and then be on with it. We wouldn't have to have these endless debates,
Or the ghost of Jesus.
I mean, Jesus is real, and he sells hot dogs in L.A.
Oh yeah, I bet he does. I don't doubt that. Well, Dan, we got some other folks that I want to get to tonight, but thank you so much for your call. Appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us.
Good talking to you again, Dan.
Yeah, have a great rest of your weekend. I was going to say Memorial Day weekend, but they're in Canada, and they don't celebrate veterans in Canada. I'm just kidding. I'm sure they probably
do. They just don't do it when we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited because I tell people to call in the show all the time, and our first two callers were people that I've talked to online. So I am really hyped up right now.
And they all want to talk to you, Kelley. That's the thing. They all want to talk to you. But we have some more callers that we wanted to get to, so we should probably get to it. Before we do, though, I do want to say we have our annual Bat Cruise fundraiser that's happening right now. So the Bat Cruise, as you know, is the thing we do every year. We have a river here in Austin that goes under a bridge that has a lot of bats, and a bunch of us hosts kind of come out on the boat, and you can just kind of hang out with us. So Forrest Valkai, J Mike, Secular Rarity, Jimmy Jr., and me will be there. Kelly's going to be there as well. And a bunch of other people are going to be there. So if you want to get your tickets, go to china.cc/backcruise. It's on August 24th this year. So go check it out. And if you're in the Austin area, we have a meetup to keep up with community events. You can see what's going on with that at tiny.cc/ACA meetup. One of the things we have is Philosophy Under the Stars, which is just a group that talks about philosophy concepts and stuff and kind of hangs out. And there's a couple other things on there as well. I think we got a game night thing going on as well. So definitely check that out if you haven't already. And I'll get to some of this other stuff later. Let's go ahead and take our next caller right now, though. We have The Seed, who's calling in from the US. The Seed, you are live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
What's up, man? How y'all doing?
Doing okay, The Seed. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I feel like you're getting left out, Dan, so I'm going to try and mainly talk to you.
No, that's okay. If anything,
go ahead.
I talk way too much. That is probably the most common criticism I get, which is fine, and it's because it's true. But you don't have to do that. Talk to Kelly as much as you want, or talk to me. Whatever floats your boat, The Seed.
I mean, I was chatting with Kelly a little bit earlier on the live stream, but whatever y'all want to talk.
Well, I believe you talked to the call screener already. So I see that you talked to him and said you were interested in talking about the dating of the New Testament and how it impacts the credence of the Bible.
Yeah, I think it's important to establish when it was dated, because if it was dated late, it's kind of hard to take it seriously as eyewitness testimony. Whereas if it's dated early, it's more likely that, or it makes it possible at least, that it's.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Obviously, conservative estimates on the scholarship date it at the earliest being like 70-ish AD, right? Not much really before that because of specific events that are kind of talked about, in the Gospels. There's some, details there that we don't have to get into in the show. But yeah, there are, of course, religious scholars that try to date it earlier than that, but mainstream consensus doesn't put the Gospels too much earlier than around that time.
I think the mainstream consensus is like 70 AD to like 110 AD or something like that.
110 for the Gospel of John, correct. The consensus is that Mark is the earliest gospel, with Matthew and Luke coming afterwards because they share a similar source. That's where the hypothetical Q document comes in, where some people say that there's another source that Matthew and Luke are borrowing from that's outside of Mark. But yeah, Mark is considered the earliest. John, much later, 80 AD at the very earliest. It could be as late as 110 AD for some people. But yeah, that's pretty much where the consensus of the scholarship is at.
Well, yeah, let me work backwards on it then. So the New Testament we have now, would y'all agree it's the same as the what's called an autograph, which is like the original manuscript that the authors of the Gospels would have wrote down?
No.
It's interesting you ask that. Certainly, I'm not qualified to say one way or another. I can only, again, pretty much recite what scholars have said. But it's debatable to say how much we can really say about what is said in the gospel account. The earliest fragments we have, because we don't have complete accounts of the gospel, date, I think, to like 110 AD or like 130 AD. And that's like a paragraph. Or even that, I think it's like a few sentences. It's not full gospel accounts. We just don't have those original texts. And that's a problem with like a lot of early historical literature, right? A lot of what we have is just what's recorded from like monks and monasteries, who are just copying these books by hand for years and years and years and years later. So, that's not a problem that's unique to the early gospels. But suffice to say, we're never going to be able to know for sure whether we have early copies. What's interesting is we do have examples of things being added later, right? One of them, most famously, is in the Gospel of John, where it talks about the lady who was going to be stoned to death for adultery, and the woman, not adultery, but being a prostitute, basically, right? And Jesus says, no, don't do this thing. This is not found in the earliest manuscripts that we have of the Gospel of John, interestingly enough. So there are some things that are definitely different. How much is different, I can't tell you. Anyway, that's a long answer. Sorry.
That's definitely correct. There's no evidence of that story in any early manuscripts. They're all from the medieval period.
Yeah.
I know that some of the things that are in Papyrus 137 aren't the same as they are in our current edition of the New Testament. So, and that's the oldest edition of Mark that we had. Well, pieces of Mark that we have. So
yes.
And some of the lines in that have changed over time. So I don't think that what was originally written down is what we're reading today. No.
Yes.
And I also think that it's been changed in translation as well. I don't think that some of the words translated very well from one language to another, and some of the translations we read were a translation of a translation.
Yeah, this is another problem that account that is against the Gospels, right? And sorry, the seed, I'll be quick with this. And this is because there's an argument that's being made here that, the Gospels were actually originally transcribed from a Arabic source, right? Because it's written in Greek. Jesus wasn't speaking Greek, when he was walking around Jerusalem, right? They weren't speaking Greek. They would have been speaking Aramaic. Sorry, not Aramaic. Anyway, I'm tired. I'm not getting my words right. But anyway, so there's some people that are saying no, because, some of the metaphors and language that's used in the New Testament kind of only makes sense in Koine, in the Greek tongue rather than Aramaic. So, there's even more layers you can get to on why we shouldn't believe that they are firsthand accounts of anybody, right? That these are more likely, stories that are cobbled together by later authors rather than anything firsthand. So do I believe that they're firsthand accounts? No. I think that the names of the Gospels, which are later attestations created by the church, right, are just that. They're just later attestations. So we call it the Gospel of Mark because the church called it the Gospel of Mark. I don't think that Mark, follower of Jesus, necessarily wrote down everything that's in there. Same goes with the other Gospels.
Yeah, and not to get on too much of a tangent, but we can definitely infer that they were speaking Aramaic because of the names in the Bible. For instance, there's you'll mainly find it with instead of saying the word Ben, which means son of, in Bar, which means son of in Aramaic. So like instead of Ben Sabbas, it says Bar Sabbas, or instead of Bartholomew, it says Bartholomew.
I mean, again, we can only speculate because we have no Aramaic sources whatsoever, right? And if Mark wrote these things, or John, or anybody, they had all had to have known Greek as well as Aramaic, which is not plausible because we're talking about the literacy of a fisherman, right? Of a working class person in that time that doesn't have the education, one, to really write things, but to be able to write full gospel accounts, in other languages that isn't their native tongue. That's suspicious, right? It seems that at least another source has to be translating it, at least. Even more than that, what I think is more likely is that these are people speaking a different language who are talking about these stories and are probably coming up with a lot of them too, or at least transcribing oral tradition rather than firsthand accounts. I think that's the more likely explanation.
Well, they definitely had, there's a technical name for it, but they're basically secretaries back then who would write down what you're saying. And I know Paul definitely refers to talk about one. But I'd like to make an argument for the Gospels being pre-70 AD, but in order to get to that, I'd have to come to a consensus with you about the how we can be sure that they haven't been added to the Gospels and everything. And
yes,
the main way we do that is you don't know about something called textual criticism?
Yes.
And so
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Then so then you know, like pretty much any ancient documents, we don't have the original, autograph of it. We have to use textual criticism to kind of work backwards and figure out to a certain degree of confidence what the original autograph was.
Yes.
And but we can do that. We can do the same thing. We can do that with the New Testament, and we can do it very well because there's tens of thousands of manuscripts. So it's not like having to decide between one or two manuscripts. Does it say this? Does it say that? They have thousands and thousands of manuscripts to compare and contrast, and it's a very complicated science. Actually, like they put different weights on what's earlier versus later.
Yes, and I'm not trying to dismiss your point because yes, in one thing that the Bible has an advantage of, at least the Gospels, over other historical sources, is the fact that we do have as many copies as we do, right? But unfortunately, that can also go against itself in a way because we also have a lot of copies of other things from early times. Like there's other Gospels that aren't in the Bible that we also have copies of, right? Granted, we don't have as many copies, right? We definitely have more of what's considered the mainstream canon, but we do have other surviving copies of other sources, which means that they were at least taken seriously by some people at some time. It doesn't lead any credency, I think, to the legitimacy of those stories, which is, I think, the main problem here. We can talk about how many copies that we have of something and how much we can verify based through textual criticisms about what's true to the original source all day long, but it doesn't necessarily point to the stories themselves being true, right? That's kind of the problem for me, at least at the end of the day.
I see where you're coming from. I'm going to try to make an argument for it being pre-70 AD, but if we can't both agree it's the original thing, you can just say, well, that was added later, or, some scribe later on put that in there. But, like you were saying, the thing in John, there's probably like 4 or 5 real big parts in the Bible where it'll even say in modern translations, this part,
yes,
you can't find this part in early manuscripts. It'll say it's an interpolation.
Yes.
And there's very, very few of those. So.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not as many, right? A lot of the interpolations are small in nature, usually grammatical in nature, right? But the fact that we at least know of some kind of gives us the question of, well, what about the others? Because again, we don't have anything before almost 100 years after Jesus's death, right? So how can we really say for sure that any of this stuff is going to be the real deal? A lot can happen in 100 years. I just can't buy the argument that we have to be more receptive to the idea that these stories are legitimate. And by legitimate, I mean actual firsthand accounts of people who witnessed the resurrection of Jesus Christ, because we have fragments that match up with each other 100 years later, right? I don't think it necessarily leans me towards, believing the accounts anymore than what I already believe at, which is not believing them. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, if we can just agree, it's not identical, but if we can agree it's virtually the same or pretty close to the original autographs, then my
don't have the original autographs. So no, I can't agree with you there. We don't know what that is.
Well, yeah, but we don't have an original autograph of the Republic, but we can use textual criticism to establish with a high degree of confidence what the Republic was.
Sure, but we also know that the Republic's been changed too over time and stuff, right? Like it also hasn't been consistent over time.
I haven't looked into the textual criticism of the Republic. I just know that it's another book, ancient book. We don't have the original of.
Yeah, and again, this is something that is true for all ancient stories or all ancient literature, I should specify, right? But the difference is too, Plato's Republic is not necessarily, I think, supposed to be taken as a literal account. I guess there are some people that really think Plato was out here having dialogue with folks and just owning people left and right, and he just kind of like wrote about it just as a humble brag. I don't think that's the case. I think this is followers attributing, stuff and then Plato writing things himself, right? I mean, there's lots of interpretations on what we could say about that.
Yeah.
But we're talking about the difference here is, again, a fictional piece versus something that is claiming to be 100% factual. Like it's not on the same level,
Yeah. Well, let me just say, anything in my argument, it's not. There's no. It's not an interpolation. There's no evidence that it was a later addition in any manuscripts. But it mainly has to do with. Are you familiar with the Book of Acts?
Yes. And sorry, I said Plato owning people. I mean Socrates, but it's Plato writing about Socrates. But anyway, sorry, Kelley. I feel like I'm talking a lot in this conversation.
No, I wanted to give. I sat back. I sat back on purpose. So,
but I'm familiar with the Book of Acts.
One of the reasons why I think the Republic is a bad thing to compare it though to is that nobody's basing their moral standards on the Republic. Yeah,
that's also true. Also, we're not basing our salvation on the Republic, which is a big deal.
There's such a thing as Neoplatonism. There's a whole, philosophy, religion, whatever you want to call it, that's based on the writings of Plato.
Yes, but that's a Christian interpretation of Platonism, mostly.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, a lot of early Christians were former Neoplatonists.
Yeah. Well, we're getting off topic here, the seed. Let's say that, I mean, did you?
Here's my argument.
Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead.
In the Book of Acts, it's a very historical kind of book. It goes through, different, histories that happen. It talks about the reign of, I think it's Claudius, and about how the Jews got kicked out of Rome during the reign of Claudius. It talks about a famine that happens in the Roman world. It's very just what's going on, what's happening, and stuff like that. But here's the thing: is that there's a few things, huge things that are missing from the Book of Acts, and probably the biggest one is the destruction of the temple in 70 AD.
Yeah.
Which it's hard to compare, but it would be like a similar thing would be like writing a history of New York in the early 2000s, and for some reason not including 9/11.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just don't think Acts is a historical book. I think Acts describes particular historical events, but I don't think that makes it a historical book. It also talks about how Paul is on an island where no snakes are there, and he gets bitten by a venomous snake and survives. Like, that's also in the Book of Acts. Also in the Book of Acts, somebody dies because they lied about not having money to give to the church. You know what I mean? So, like, I don't know if we should be counting the Book of Acts as anything historical, but I guess if you're talking about historical in that it's describing historical events, I mean, it does make references to it, but it's certainly not a chronology. Like, it's certainly not like a history textbook on events at the time.
Wait, tell me what island doesn't have snakes on it, because I'd like to listen to that later. Was it Crete?
I believe, was it the details here is, I believe Paul is it Patmos, right? Am I right about this, Kelley? I gotta remember this, but Paul is basically doing his thing, and then he gets bitten by a snake, and then he lives. But there's like no venomous snakes in the area of which he supposedly is at.
Yeah, I'm not sure what island it was. Patmos was where John lived, though.
That's right. Maybe I'm getting mixed up with John. But anyway, it's details.
Well, I'll definitely look into that for sure. But I guess to put my argument succinctly would be,
Malta.
Assuming you're correct that that Acts was written after 70 AD, can you give me a reasonable explanation why several huge things are mentioned? The biggest one being the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. But in addition to that, there's nothing about the siege of Rome that happens for 2 to 3 years before the temple falls in 70 AD. And more the deaths of Paul, Peter, and James, the brother of Jesus, are not mentioned in Acts. though we know
Yeah.
he died in the 60s. Yet for some reason he mentions the death of Stephen, who's just some random guy. He includes that, but he doesn't include Paul. Like, give me a reasonable explanation for that.
Okay, first, it's the island of Malta. Let me correct myself there. Pat, you're right. Patmos is where John of the Book of Revelation wrote the Book of Revelation. Malta is where Paul was at. It's in Acts 28, in case you want to look that up. So again, if I don't write about, if I'm talking about my own experiences and my own life story, and I don't write about, I don't know. I guess if I'm talking about something that happened to me in 2020 and I don't mention COVID, that doesn't mean that like COVID didn't happen, or that like, I don't know, it has anything to do with the veracity of my story being true or not. I just maybe didn't mention it in my story, right? Like, but I don't think the Gospels are meant to be a chronicle of Jewish history in Jewish politics. It certainly mentions it, and it's certainly, you can argue it's quite integral to some of the themes in the gospel, but it's not necessarily this happened here, then this happened here, then this happened here. I think it's a combination of different stories. If anything, it actually makes more sense that this isn't a firsthand account, that this is a cobbled together version of events from later authors, because they're picking and choosing as to what they decide to be important within the gospel accounts, right? So I don't know if this actually makes the Bible more coherent as a firsthand account, or the Gospels as a firsthand account. I think it lends to the argument that it's not a firsthand account, that it's written by other people that have decided to write other things about what they want to talk about,
Yeah. Well, there's a scholarly consensus that whoever wrote Acts also wrote the Gospel of Luke. Would you agree?
Yes, I think that's true. Okay. I have no problem with that interpretation.
Predicted that the temple would fall, and literally no stone would be left unturned on it.
Sorry, you cut out for just a second there. Can you repeat yourself?
Yeah, in the Gospel of Luke, it talks about they're walking outside the temple, and they say, "Look at all these big stones. You see all this?" And Yeshua prophesies, and he says, "I'm telling you, every single, I'm paraphrasing, every single stone you see is going to be overturned. Not one will be left on top."
That's in Mark. That's not in Matthew. If you said Matthew.
No, it's in Matthew and Luke.
I think you're talking about Mark, because Mark that's how scholars are saying this has to have been written after 70 AD, because it's after the fall of the temple. Right? That's the crux of the argument of why Mark is at a later date. Or at the date that it's at, not a later date, because Mark is the earliest.
Yeah, I think all three of the Synoptic Gospels contain the prophecy about the temple falling.
I mean, they might. I think there may be some references to it in other ones, but that is like the central crux of why we date Mark the way that we do, right? Is because it talks about those events. Because it makes more sense that somebody is talking about those events after the fact they happened, rather than somebody prophesying about something that hasn't happened yet, right?
Right, but that's my point is, suppose you are, the thought experiment. Suppose me and you or you're Luke, and you're writing the gospel and you're writing Acts after 70 AD, and you write your gospel and you put, that Yeshua predicted that the temple would fall. Why wouldn't you then include in Acts that the temple did fall? Because that would help give credence to the claim that he's a prophet. Doesn't make any sense.
Because Acts isn't talking about Jesus. Acts is describing the followers of Jesus.
Yeah, but the same guy who wrote Luke wrote Acts. So if
why would he write the same thing again in a different book?
Oh, because it would make him look like a prophet if he said in one book that hey, he's predicting this temple is gonna fall, and then in the sequel in Acts he says, oh look, it did fall. That would give credence to him being a prophet.
Yeah, I think this is another case of you kind of proving my point that like that there may be interpolations in Luke, right? Because like, yeah, why wouldn't he write about that? Maybe because Luke has also been handled in some way or another. But I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that's the case. I'm just saying that we don't have original records of any of this stuff. I think it's very fair to claim, as most scholars do, that Luke and Acts are written by the same person. But what is him not mentioning one thing in one book but mentioning it in another? I don't think that gives you any favors in this argument, right? I don't think that actually helps your case. I don't think it serves to the interest of it being earlier in time.
Well, no, but the part I'm referencing isn't an interpolation. It's not a part that's like up for question or anything. It's found in the early manuscripts.
And then again, that's fine.
I don't.
But like, why does that matter?
I don't think it. Well, because for me, I try to think about things reasonably, and if I don't think it's reasonable for someone to write Luke and Acts after 70 AD to put in Luke a prophecy about the temple falling after the fact, and then not fulfill that prophecy in Acts. That doesn't make any sense.
I don't think it makes any sense that somebody is saying that somebody rose from the dead either. I mean, like we can talk about what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. I think there's a lot of other events that are talked about there that lend more, to questionability than why would this person put something here and then not another thing here? I don't think maybe we're talking past each other here, but like I don't see how this serves the case for Christianity in any meaningful way. But we've been talking about this for a long time, and I'm worried that we're getting too in the weeds for our core audience for me to understand. I'm trying to like explain the points that I'm coming from, or the points where I'm getting this information from as I'm going. So hopefully this is educational for people who have maybe not have looked into this as much. But again, I don't see why that's a problem. That he talks about a prophecy in one book and doesn't talk about it in another book. Who cares? I don't know why that's a big deal.
Okay. Well, can I make one last point or claim or whatever?
Very quickly.
Okay. Thank you for taking my call and giving me your time.
You're welcome.
If because you'd agree the writings of Paul are from the 50s and 60s, right?
The writings of Paul, according to, again, I'm not a scholar. I can't say, yeah, this is what it is, right? Everything that I say on this show, when I'm referring to any claims made about the Bible, I try to cite from consensus of scholarship. So that's just for audience to know. I'm not an academic. I'm just somebody who reads. And the consensus among scholarship is, yes, the letters from Paul, the legitimate letters, by the way, because fun fact, not all the letters in the gospel that say they're written by Paul are actually written by Paul, at least according to scholars. The ones that are written by Paul and are legitimate tend to come between 50 to the late 60s AD, right? So that's the consensus.
Yeah. Well, then can you tell me how is Paul quoting from Luke if Luke was written after 70 AD?
Well, because I think that there is an argument to be made for Paul wasn't reading Gospels, I don't think. Well, that's not true. He does cite some other early Christian stuff that could have been written down. I think Paul is referring a lot to oral tradition. I think there's a strong case for that. We talk about the early Christian church is not a literate group of people for the most part. Most of them are having one person read to a group of other people. And so there's a couple of different sources that go around. One of those sources, by the way, being the letters from Paul, which is why we have them in the Bible because of their circulation along the Christian church. But they were probably looking at it from other sources as well, because he's talking about Luke, but he also, this isn't Paul, but Peter is talking from the book of Enoch, for example. That's another, kind of famous attestation that's made in the Bible, where the Bible is quoting from a book that's not in the Bible or considered not canon by the mainstream church, because they're looking at sources and dealing with stuff that just is kind of going around. Just because a part of Luke is being told by Paul doesn't mean that the entirety of Luke, as we know it today, is what existed back then. And maybe it did in some form or another, but there's also parts from Mark that seem to very similar to Luke and are very similar to Matthew. And John has some parts that are similar to other stuff. So can we say that he's talking about Matthew specifically or Luke specifically? I don't know if we can make that case, because Luke is also borrowing from other sources. So who knows? It could be Luke. It could be something else, right?
No, I understand your point of the whole oral tradition thing, but the two verses in First Timothy that he's quoting Luke from, it kind of rules that out, because it says, quote, the elders who rule well will be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in preaching and teaching. For the scripture says, and then he quotes the Old Testament, you shall not muzzle an ox while it is treading out the grain. And then he quotes Luke. He says, the laborer deserves to be paid.
Okay.
And so, but he uses the word scripture, which is graphai in Greek. It literally means the writing. So yeah, if he was talking about an oral tradition, he would have said, use some Greek word for oral tradition, but he actually says the scripture, the graphai. Yeah,
I'm not saying that an oral tradition couldn't have become written word at that point, right? I'm not saying that there wasn't anything that could be circulating at that time. Certainly there could be something written down at that point, but we're talking about one particular line that may be from this source, or it could be from a completely other different source. Right? We don't know. All he says is scriptures. He doesn't say specifically from the Gospel of Luke. We know this, right? Like there's a lot of questions about early Christianity that we don't know about. So
I think it's reasonable to infer he's talking about the Gospel of Luke.
I don't know that it is. We just don't have evidence that supports that outside of the one line. And even then it could be from other sources, right? There's a reason why the Q hypothesis has had the standing that it has had in biblical circles, right? In scholarly circles, because of the generation of like information that comes from the Gospels, like seems to be coming from other sources. So it makes sense that the rest of it is also coming from other sources, right? Which is how the hypothetical kind of Q document comes into place. But I don't know that I'm sorry. That's really all the time that we got for this particular call. But I appreciate you calling in the seed. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Taking my time, and y'all have a great night. God bless y'all.
Thanks. Thank you. You too.
Thanks for calling the seed.
Yep. Sorry, Kelly. We got really in the weeds there.
I sat back on that one on purpose. So that was fine.
I like getting in. I like at least, educating at some level, telling an audience people who may not have heard about this stuff or have read much into it, because stuff like this comes up when you're talking to people who have read it. And I want to be able to give people some answers, right, to questions and stuff. So, I don't mind conversations like that. I just worry that I get too far into the weeds and it's not interesting for people. Because I know it's very interesting to me, but I'm a weirdo. So
I can tell you what, the YouTube chat didn't slow down at all.
That's good.
Were keeping right up with it. So
that's great. So it is an interesting case, right? Paul is talking about this other source that says he's talking about, scriptures and stuff, but we don't have attestations at this point of what the Gospels were. That's another problem that we have, is that we have these names on the Gospels. If you ever wondered, hey, where those names come from, the earliest scriptures that we have, earliest fragments, don't say, oh, this is the Gospel of Mark, or hey, John wrote this, right? It's attestations that are made at a much later time by the church to these scriptures. So there's just a lot of question marks with early Christianity on what we can count as a source and what we can count in terms of dating and stuff. Gets into the weeds a little bit on some of this, but that was overall a good conversation. I did enjoy that. Anyway, Kelley,
I enjoyed listening to it.
Oh, good. I felt really awkward because you're just hanging out with us here.
No,
and
I purposely sat back on that one because the seed did say he wanted to talk to you. So
okay, well,
and he and I had a conversation earlier today online, so I figured let you and him go at it.
There you go. That's good. Crew has some more super chats for me, I think. Nope, actually we don't. I think we're good there. I do need to mention two more things. If you are watching the weekly watch parties at the Free Thought Library on Sundays for live viewings of Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience every Sunday, that's really cool. If you haven't heard about it, you should join in. So the doors open at 11, and it's an awesome place to watch the show with other folks. We don't do the shows in the building at the moment. Obviously, we're doing it remotely, but you can still watch them together in person with other people at the building. So more information on that is at the website, and you can go to that link in the description. And I also need to thank the wonderful, awesome, amazing crew that helped make this show happen every single week. And we're going to that crew cam right now. Thank you, crew, for helping us out in all the things that we do here. Let's look at other notes here. I think I kind of covered everything. We do have one more caller in the queue that I kind of want to talk to, but we are getting like kind of close. We're kind of a little bit over time in terms of the end of the show. What do you think, Kelley? You think we can tackle in like 5 minutes, or do you think we should?
Say, how about we do a short one, 5 minutes? I was just going to say that. How about that?
I think we should do it too. I think this is interesting enough to do this. But I'll give a warning right now. Jeffrey from Philadelphia, you're live on the air with Truth Wanted, but you got 5 minutes to talk to us, and that is it. We cannot go over. So go ahead, Jeffrey. Make your case to us. What's going on?
Thank you, Dan. Hello, Kelley. Nice to talk to both. Just wanted to add to the earlier conversation. Have either of you gentlemen ever considered that the commandment that was given in the garden, or what God was, the knowledge that God was keeping from mankind or was trying to keep from mankind was the evil of, or the suffering that results from evil?
Could be. If he was really trying to do that, I don't think he should have put a tree there in the first place, because it sounds like that's a risk, you know?
Why did God create suffering in the first place?
That too.
Well,
why did God create evil in the first place?
Well, because evil okay, let me try to the commandment itself, whenever God said, "Thou shalt not do anything," in that, when he made that statement, he was creating evil at that moment.
Okay, so why did he have to create evil?
Yeah.
It was to instruct us to.
You cut out there, Jeffrey. Can you repeat that? Jeffrey, you still on the line with us? Oh, no.
You still there?
Oh, there you go, Jeffrey. We got you now. Go ahead and repeat yourself if you don't mind. Hello, Jeffrey. Oh, no. Have we lost you? Give you a couple more seconds. All right, Jeffrey, I think we lost you here.
Yeah,
and that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate, but that's okay. We're kind of towards the end. But yeah, have I considered that, you know, God put it there so that we didn't have to suffer? Okay, sure. I've considered it now. I'm wondering, have you considered that none of this is real, that it's just a story, that it actually makes more sense that this is a myth created just like every other myth in human history, and that there's nothing special about this one other than the fact that, you know, it's as popular as it is, but also we have two different accounts of Genesis, interestingly enough. And the events that happened there. And they're both kind of right next to each other in the same place. I think that's really weird. To me, that says more that this is a story that's being told different ways rather than actual events in history, period. So the motives of the characters involved are interesting to talk about in theory, I guess. But outside of that, doesn't really matter because it's not real. I just don't think any of it's real. Right, Kelley? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm with you. That's why I wanted to know why God even created evil, because I don't think God created evil. I don't think anybody created it. So
yeah,
except for men.
Yeah, I think we cover this.
The evil that men do.
Yeah, like again, if I put a flamethrower in the garden and somebody killed somebody else with a flamethrower, yeah, they shouldn't have done that, I guess. But like, why was that there? It didn't have to be there. Same thing with the tree. Why is the tree? Why is it there? Who is it for? Why does God need to protect people from good and evil? Maybe because, interestingly enough, this account in Genesis uses the word Elohim to describe God, which means God's plural. It's talking about a council of gods. They don't want it to be like them. When they use that we, it's not the royal we. When you're reading some of those translations, it's literally talking about a plural because this is an adaptation of a different story that, gets put into, the, at the time, monotheistic interpretation of Judaism.
Well, isn't there some archaeological evidence that Yahweh in his earliest incarnations had a wife? So maybe that's the we, is the two of them. That's
part of it. Early Semitic tribes were polytheistic in nature, and there's several points of evidence that support that. It's only later down as Judaism evolves into its own thing that it becomes a monolateral sort of religion. At least that's some interpretations of history, right? Again, not a historian, but that's, at least it is a known fact that at some point in time, early Semitic people definitely believed in multiple gods. And at some point, some of them just believed in one. And I think that story is a kind of a bridge in that sort of chain of events, I see you laughing. Yeah. What you laughing at?
No, I'm just laughing. Some of the calls we got tonight I thought were a little bit funny and off the wall. So yeah. It's maybe not funny and off the wall, but they didn't, like our first call. I don't think the person thought it through really well before calling us.
I don't know. I don't know what goes through our callers' heads sometimes.
Yeah, I don't either.
You know what?
I don't. Like I said, I don't know, but I don't think.
I appreciate everybody that calls in regardless, because you know what? It's a brave thing to call people that disagree with you and to have a conversation live on the air. Props to you regardless. So anyway, I think we need to wrap things up here, Kelley. If people want to find you, where should they go, Kelley? What should they do?
You can find me here sometimes. You can also find me at the nonprofits. And that's about it. I just hang out here at the ACA. I back up host of quite a few of the shows, and I'm just pretty much an ACA guy.
Heck yeah. Okay. The Discord is going to be having an after show in it with Kelley and somebody else. I'm not going to be able to attend, but if you want to do that, go to tiny.cc/ACD Discord to hang out with some folks. Other than that, I also want to give. Oh,
I'm about to say I'll be there with our backup host.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, our backup host Infidel64 is going to be hanging out there. So thank you to Infidel64. Shout outs for being our backup host tonight. And shout outs to you, Kelley, for being able to host that after show. The prompt this week is, what's the difference between Jesus and pizza? Again, maybe the craziest prompt we've ever had. Ever. So good job, Kelley.
I might be the craziest host you ever had. So
that might also be true. So comment on the video and your comment may be read in next week's episode. That is going to be it for this night's Truth Wanted. I'm Objectively Dan. Remember to always keep wanting the truth, and I'll see you next time.
Watch the non-prophets and join the hosts in the live chat. Visit tiny.cc/ytnp.